So Representative Ilhan Omar is one of the first Muslim women in the House of Representatives. Now, she is being attacked by establishment Democrats teaming up with the right wing. Apparently, they are referring to her as anti-Semitic, right? So now, earlier today, and this whole started, earlier on Sunday, Representative Omar pointed out an issue of money in politics. Now, money in politics is something that I talk about on the show all the time. How money basically buys you influence and basically helps these politicians make a decision on what policies they wish to go through, right? That they wish to push through. So there's a lot of money, in politics, and that again is influence. However, apparently, if you're talking about the money that AIPAC, which is an Israeli, a pro-Israeli lobbying group, you want to point out how they use money in politics to gain influence. Well, that apparently makes you anti-Semitic. Now, see, here's the thing, right? Now, this admission should not be controversial, right? Israel has lobbyists. That's AIPAC, right? You know who else also has lobbyists? Saudi Arabia. A lot of other countries have lobbyists. A lot of special interests have lobbyists. And they all lobby politicians in order to pass pieces of legislation, right? Still, apparently Representative Omar stepped in it when she tweeted, quote, "It's all about the Benjamins," in response to a news story about House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy threatening action against both herself and Representative Rashida Tlaib. Now, of course, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are in favor of Palestinian rights. So McCarthy had said that their pro-Palestinian comments have been more reprehensible than Representative Steve King's history of open white supremacy. Really? Oh, okay, man. Sure. All right. You want to say that? Well, maybe we'll come back to that. But now she also added, rightly so, that AIPAC donates funds to secure pro-Israel legislation from Congress, in the same way that the NRA and pro-gun lawmakers receive support from the NRA, as well as unions that donate to the campaigns of pro-labor politicians. So it just shows that, look, you will have these special interest groups and they will donate money to politicians that share their beliefs. And that's how this operates. What's wrong with that? Well, when you talk about AIPAC, it's apparently anti-Semitic. Apparently. And look, again, a lot of right-wingers were, of course, attacking Ilhan Omar because they always attack her. And anti-Semitism is just another one of the charges they try to levy on her. And unfortunately, establishment Democrats jumped in as well, starting with Nancy Pelosi, and of course, there are some other Jewish members. Now, they put out a statement. They said legitimate criticism of Israel's policies is protected by the values of free speech and democratic debate that the United States and Israel share. I don't know about that. But she adds, Congresswoman Omar's use of anti-Semitic tropes and prejudicial accusations about Israel's supporters is deeply offensive. We condemn these remarks and call upon Congresswoman Omar to immediately apologize for these hurtful comments. As Democrats and as Americans, the entire Congress must be fully engaged in denouncing and rejecting all forms of hatred, racism, prejudice, and discrimination wherever they are encountered. But wait a minute. Anti-Semitic tropes, pointing out how lobbying works, is not anti-Semitic. But, okay, so she's accused of using tropes, right? Well, what trope is that? Well, look, let's explain. The right wing, especially the far right, loves to push the idea that Jews control the world, right? And so that they all have the money, they use your money, power, influence, they're all bankers or whatever, and that's how they control the world. Well, that's ridiculous. Their favorite attack is to go after George Soros. Now, George Soros funds some liberal causes, but the right's like, oh no, everybody on the left, they don't believe in their positions. They're just getting funded by George Soros, and they're communists. Again, that's ridiculous. me personally, I can only speak for myself, but I've never received a George Soros check. It's a ridiculous smear, right? But the thing is, that conspiracy is not the same as pointing out how the system actually works. Lobbyists paying politicians in order to get them to be more receptive to voting for pieces of legislation. That's how government actually works right now with our system of money in politics. But these politicians, whenever you point that out, they're so incensed that you would talk about it. And in the issue of AIPAC, they've got a weapon on their side, and that's the weapon of anti-Semitism, right? So if you point this out, you're anti-Semitic. Ridiculous, right? That's why this is a smear. And look, let me give you some numbers here, and we'll see if that's true or not. Because look, one of the tweets, defending this attack on Representative Omar is saying, well, it is absolutely not true that Israeli lobby pays off politicians. Really? Well, the Center for Responsive Politics showed that AIPAC spent more than $3.5 million in 2018 alone on pro-Israel measures that lawmakers voted on, including funding for Israel and the bipartisan Senate Senate bill to ban boycotts of Israeli goods and services. That is the anti-BDS bill, which is actually against the Constitution. It is an unconstitutional piece of legislation. And of course, 18 senators and 13 members of the House had also received more than $100,000 each from pro-Israel groups. I wonder which way they voted. But no, pointing that out, anti-Semitic. And apparently, the Center for Responsive Politics, which actually tracks money in politics and where it goes, including NRA money, including Saudi Arabian money, etc., well, that organization must also be anti-Semitic. Ridiculous. No, what happened is these politicians, they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. And so they cry and cry and cry. And what weapon do they have? Unfortunately, they have anti-Semitism. That exists. That is real. But when you weaponize it against people, against progressives, then you are doing the cause of fighting anti-Semitism a huge disservice. And then you make it easier for people on the right wing with their insane conspiracy theories to do actual anti-Semitism. Because you silence everyone on the left. And you silence everyone on the left when it comes to the issue of money in politics. It is deeply hurtful, nonetheless. By the way, you want to know who also gets money from a different country? Saudi Arabia, Jared Kushner. Do we treat that the same? No, of course not. And other than the incredibly damaging tropes, which there are other tropes to people in Saudi Arabia, for example, there's Islamophobia, right? That exists massively on the right wing. And yet, there are right-wing politicians that take a lot of money from Saudi Arabia. It's the same, but way different reaction. But anyway, I have a quote here from Rebecca Vilkomerson, who is the executive director of the Jewish Voice for Peace. Now, she points this out, rightly so, as a smear. She said, would talking about the role of the NRA and gun control laws attract this kind of attention? Lobbies influence politics. I don't think that's controversial to say. And she's right. She nails it. The Israeli lobby, unfortunately, pushes laws favorable to the right-wing Israeli government. Now, I'm not a fan of the right wing of the Israeli government. And I'm also not a fan to a lot of their policies, especially when it comes to the Palestinian territories, right? I'm not in favor of that. Now, saying that should not be controversial. I'm not saying, nobody is saying we're against Jewish people as a whole. No, what we're saying is maybe this right-wing government shouldn't be able to lobby, and I don't believe any government or any institution should be able to lobby our government. And I definitely believe that since we have this system, it shouldn't be a bad thing to point that out. But unfortunately, when it comes to Israel, it's insane. We have this insanity where you can't call that out because it's apparently anti-Semitism. ridiculous, right? Now, look, it, I mentioned the anti-BDS bill, right? Again, that is a way that we have criminalized making the decision to not buy Israeli products. Now, I don't necessarily even agree with the anti-BDS movement, but I agree that they should absolutely have a right to exercise their own buying preferences and not be forced to buy from a government that they disagree with. They should have a choice in what they boycott. The government shouldn't punish people for not choosing to buy things. So, in this case, too, you can definitely make an argument that these politicians got influenced into passing this legislation, which is deeply, I believe, anti-American. Now, Representative Omar did apologize for this. She said, "Anti-Semitism is real, and I'm grateful for Jewish allies and colleagues who are educating me on the painful history of anti-Semitic tropes," which again do exist, right? "My intention is never to offend my constituents or Jewish Americans as a whole. We always have to be willing to step back and think through criticism, just as I expect people to hear me when others attack me for my identity. This is why I unequivocally apologize." She did say, though, "At the same time, I reaffirm the problematic role of lobbyists in our politics. Whether it be AIPAC, the NRA, or the fossil fuel industry, it's gone on too long, and we must be willing to address it." But that's what you tried to do. And you immediately got shut down, not just by the right wing, but by the supposed left, who end up actually getting a lot of money from AIPAC. This is how a smear works. And by the way, this whole thing started with the right wing. Now, the interesting thing about the right wing is that they only care about Israel, not because they care about the Jews. No, it's because in their doomsday scenario, Jesus comes back to Israel and kills all the Jews who don't convert to Christianity. That's insane. But unfortunately, again, that's what they believe, and that's the only reason they care so much about Israel. Whereas people on the left actually care about Israel, but we also care about the peace and stability of Israel. That's why we want a two-state solution, because that is the only way you're ever going to get peace. You're ever going to get stability in that region is if you have a two-state solution, both recognized by the international community. Now, the Palestinians have tried to do that, but they have not been allowed thanks to the United States. And I wonder what influenced the United States to go that way. Again, right-wingers here in America and right-wingers in Israel have sort of the same kind of MO. They want to keep power, and they want endless conflict so that people are afraid so that they can stay in power and make money. That's what this is about. So, look, this is ridiculous. And we're not allowed, apparently, to point out the real problem: money in politics. And that's why I believe we have to get all the money out. Union money, corporate money, Israeli money, Saudi Arabian money, Planned Parenthood money. It doesn't matter. Get it all out. Get rid of private financing of elections and go completely 100% public. Because when you have private financing of elections, then you end up having these politicians that serve only private interests. And that is not the way a democracy should operate. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.